Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of just complete clinical precision.
Right, like it's totally objective and clear cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Reach your arm, the x-ray shows this jagged white line right on the radius bone, and the doctor just points to it and says, there's your problem.
It's binary, it's super clean.
It's comforting, honestly, because the pathology is right there. It's visible. You can just point at the fracture.
You can measure the tumor, yeah.
Right. But then, if you step into the world of organizational health and specifically company culture, that x-ray machine is just, well, it's completely useless.
Oh, completely. They're suddenly looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
And this is for you listening right now, whether you're, trying to build the next massive unicorn startup or managing a mid-level team in some legacy corporation, or honestly just endlessly curious about human behavior at work.
Because let's be honest, you spend the vast majority of your waking life in an organizational structure.
You really do. So today's deep dive is all about rewiring exactly how you view that structure.
We're basically dismantling this whole idea that culture is this soft, qualitative, almost, mystical aura that surrounds a company.
Yeah, it's not magic. We're looking at it through a lens forged in some of the highest stakes environments on the planet.
Which is why we're pulling from this brilliant operational masterclass built by Dr. Shishir Gupta.
And just to set a baseline here, this isn't some theory from an academic who has never met a payroll in his life.
Right, definitely not. He's the founder of a global accelerator. They've facilitated north of $111 million in institutional funding across hundreds of high-growth startups.
It's $111 million. That is serious capital. And when you're looking at the inner workings of that many companies across that many countries, you really start to see the code behind the matrix,
You see exactly what makes the engine purr and what makes it completely tear itself apart.
So the premise we have to start with, the very first thing you have to unlearn immediately, is this myth of the accidental culture.
Yes. The accidental culture is arguably the most dangerous trap any leader can fall into.
Why is it so dangerous, though?
Largely because it feels like you're doing something right when you're actually doing absolutely nothing.
Okay, let me push on that a bit, because the pop culture image of a quote-unquote great startup culture is pretty thoroughly ingrained in all of us by now.
Oh yeah, we all know the stereotypes.
Right. We think of kombucha on tap. We think of the ping pong table in the break room, the beanbag chairs.
The obligatory Friday happy hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe some HR consultant came in and helped you put your core values on a frosted glass wall in the lobby. Are you saying none of that matters?
I'm saying it's actually worse than not mattering. It's a decoy.
A decoy?
Yeah, it lulls leadership into a false sense of security. If you treat culture passively, like assuming that because you bought a foosball table and offer unlimited PTO, this high-performance culture will just organically sprout from the ground.
You think the work is done?
Right, but you are actively inviting chaos. You leave a vacuum. And in human organizations, vacuums are immediately filled by internal politics, siloed thinking, and self-preservation.
Wow. Okay. So here's the operational definition we need to center on today from the masterclass.
Yeah.
Culture is not what you print on a branded hoodie. Culture is the behavioral default of your organization when the boss leaves the room.
The behavioral default when nobody is watching. That is exactly it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we strip away all the HR initiatives and the free snacks, we need a totally new framework. And the term used in the text is that culture is the invisible operating system of a high-velocity enterprise.
Which is a great mechanical analogy. I mean, think about the device you're using right now to listen to this deep dive.
Right, my phone or my laptop?
Exactly. The operating system, iOS, Windows, whatever, runs quietly underneath all the flashy apps. Its entire job is resource allocation and error handling.
It manages the memory, it schedules the processing threads.
And crucially, when a program crashes, the OS dictates exactly how the machine recovers without suffering a total systemic failure.
Okay, so mapping that to human capital. The culture is the compiled machine code for how your team handles crises.
Precisely. Let's say a critical database gets corrupted at 2 a.m. on a Sunday.
A nightmare scenario.
Right. Or your biggest client suddenly threatens to terminate their contract. Or two senior directors have a fundamental disagreement on the product roadmap. Your company's culture is the OS that dictates the resolution to all of that.
So does the engineering team panic and try to hide the data loss? Or does the sales team just start pointing fingers at the account managers?
Or do they collaboratively swarm the problem with total transparency? You can hire the most brilliant, talented individuals in the world, the best apps, essentially.
But if your cultural operating system is buggy, the whole machine's going to freeze.
Exactly. It sets up this trajectory of alignment that totally separates winning organizations from the ones that just slowly bleed out.
Okay, so on one hand, the text talks about bureaucratic drift, and on the other, the high-velocity matrix. Bureaucratic drift feels so familiar to anyone who has ever worked in a massive legacy corporation.
Oh, we've all felt it. It's what happens when that accidental culture takes root. Because humans are biologically wired for self-preservation.
Right.
If there is no intentional, rigorous cultural framework in place, employees will naturally optimize for their own safety.
Which means they start optimizing for internal politics.
Exactly. Their primary goal becomes pleasing their direct manager rather than solving actual friction for the end user.
And structurally, that just causes all decision-making to bottleneck at the executive level, right?
Totally. Frontline employees don't have a clear set of guiding principles to make trade-offs, so they just freeze up, they wait for permission.
They send a, 6-paragraph email asking to approve a $50 software license.
We've all written that email.
Yeah.
And communication fractures completely. You start seeing hidden agendas, people ceasing half the company just to cover their own tracks.
But the alternative, this high-velocity matrix, operates on non-negotiable core values and radical transparency.
Which is what enables decentralized decision-making. People move fast because the boundaries are actually clear.
And this brings us to a mathematical formula from the source that I absolutely love, the velocity equation.
Yes. Organizational velocity equals autonomy multiplied by vision alignment, all divided by bureaucracy plus communication friction.
Wait, let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly for everyone. So organizational velocity equals autonomy times vision alignment all over bureaucracy plus communication friction.
That's the one. It's literally the physics of an enterprise.
That's like building a race car.
That's right.
You can have a massive, roaring V12 engine, which represents your capital, your talent, your total addressable market.
Right.
But if the aerodynamics of the car are terrible, if it's basically shaped like a cinder block, that is your bureaucracy. It's creating immense drag.
And if the steering column isn't properly connected to the front axle, meaning your team doesn't actually understand the vision that is your communication friction?
So it doesn't matter how much horsepower you have. You're either going to crawl at 5 miles an hour or you're going to slam right into a concrete wall.
The denominator of that equation, the bureaucracy and the friction, is the aerodynamic drag. You have to aggressively minimize it. But the numerator is where the magic really happens. Autonomy multiplied by vision alignment.
Okay, this is where I have to play devil's advocate. Or at least I need to voice what I know a skeptical founder is thinking right now.
Go for it.
You want me to grant absolute autonomy to a team of 20-somethings? Doesn't unconstrained autonomy just lead to absolute chaos? I mean, people just running rogue, spending money, changing code without oversight.
That is precisely why it is a multiplication equation and not addition. Autonomy times vision alignment. If you grant high autonomy but you have zero vision alignment, yes, you get absolute chaos. You have brilliant, highly paid people sprinting at top speed in a dozen completely different directions.
It's essentially Lord of the Flies with MacBooks.
Exactly. But the inverse is just as bad.
High vision alignment with low autonomy.
Right. You get a profoundly frustrated, micromanaged workforce. They know exactly where the company needs to go. They see the market opportunity.
But they aren't allowed to take a single step toward it without filling out a requisition form in triplicate.
And getting approval from a manager who has been on vacation for 2 weeks. The core insight here is that autonomy is only functional when it is tightly bounded by extreme clarity of vision.
So when you have both high autonomy multiplied by high alignment, the mathematical result is geometric execution speed.
You don't have to micromanage because the team's internal compass is already calibrated to true north.
Wow. So if we accept that culture must be engineered with this level of mechanical rigor, what are the load-bearing pillars of that system? The text outlines 5 distinct pillars of a high-velocity culture.
And pillar 1 hits like a freight train right out of the gate.
It really does. Pillar 1, hire and fire by core values.
It's easily the most common piece of business advice, and yet it is the most rarely executed. Leaders love writing core values, but they absolutely hate enforcing them.
Right, because it's hard.
But core values are entirely worthless if they exist only as decorative text. They have to serve as a ruthless behavioral litmus test during recruitment and, more importantly, during performance reviews.
There is a fantastic real-world dilemma presented the masterclass that highlights exactly how painful this is in practice. A founder down in Austin, Texas, writes in with a problem.
Oh, the brilliant jerk dilemma.
Yes. So he has this brilliant lead developer. We're talking about a true 10x engineer whose code is literally keeping the startup's core product functioning right now.
Okay.
But this individual is incredibly toxic. He degrades the junior staff, he's arrogant, he completely refuses to document his work. And the founder is paralyzed because the company's immediate revenue depends on this guy's output. Does he keep him?
The operational directive from Dr. Gupta here is unequivocal. You fire him immediately.
You just pull the plug, even knowing the product deployment is going to stall the very next morning.
Yes, because you have to calculate the invisible cost of retention. If you tolerate a toxic high performer, you are broadcasting a blaring siren to your entire organization.
What are you broadcasting exactly?
You are explicitly telling your team that output matters more than human respect. You are demonstrating that your stated core values are actually completely negotiable, provided someone codes fast enough or closes enough sales.
So it's like a localized infection that goes systemic.
Exactly. One brilliant jerk will systematically strip mine your culture. They will drive away your most promising junior talent, who will just quietly quit because they simply don't want to endure the daily psychological abuse.
That makes a lot of sense. The talent drain.
Right. The long-term compound interest you pay in turnover, lost psychological safety, and reputational damage vastly outweighs whatever elegant code that engineer is writing this sprint.
Because talent is an abundant global commodity, but integrity is non-negotiable.
Precisely.
This bridges perfectly into a framework that really shook up the tech world when Netflix popularized it, the Keeper Test.
Reed Hastings built this into the very foundation of Netflix to maintain radical talent density.
I mean, think about traditional corporate HR. If someone is underperforming, you put them on a performance improvement plan. You do these complex 360 reviews.
You document everything for 6 months just to legally cover yourself before you eventually manage them out.
It's exhausting.
Netflix looked at that and realized it was pure bureaucratic drag, so they scrapped it. Instead, they require their managers to continuously, actively ask themselves one hypothetical question about every single direct report.
If this person told me they were quitting today to take a similar role at a competitor, would I fight tooth and nail to keep them?
Right, and if the honest answer is no, if your internal reaction is, well, it would be a hassle to replace them, but honestly, it might be a relief.
Then you are failing the company by keeping them.
Exactly. You give them a generous severance and let them go.
Wait, I can hear the objection to this already from our listeners. Doesn't that just create a culture of terror?
Huh.
Well, if I'm an employee, and I know my boss is evaluating me every single day on whether they'd fight to keep me, I'm going to be constantly terrified of making even a single mistake.
Okay.
That sounds like a fast track to burnout.
That is the most common critique, for sure. And it's why the Keeper test must be paired with two critical counterbalances. First, extreme psychological safety regarding risk-taking.
Which we'll get to in a moment.
Right. You aren't fired for trying something new and failing. You're fired for sustained mediocrity or toxic behavior.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
And second, the Keeper test requires a massive, generous severance package. We're talking a minimum of 4 to 6 months of full pay.
Oh, wow. Half a year's salary.
Yeah. The manager can say, look, you are a good person, but you aren't a superstar in this specific role. Here is half a year's salary. Go find a place where you can be a superstar.
It forces managers to never settle for B players. But it treats the exiting employee with profound financial dignity.
It's an engineering mindset applied to talent. You wouldn't leave a block of inefficient legacy code in your core product just because you felt bad for it. You refactor it.
Okay, moving to pillar 2. Radical transparency as the default state.
In legacy corporate structures, information is treated as a currency, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Middle managers hoard data because it makes them feel indispensable. I know the budget, you don't, therefore I am powerful.
Exactly. But in a high-velocity startup, that kind of hoarding is fatal. Information transparency has to be nearly absolute.
Another great stress test of this comes from a CEO in Mumbai mentioned in the text. He's running a startup and they hit a severe cash crunch.
A tale as old as time.
Truly. So he asks if he should share the actual financial burn rate and runway with his junior employees.
Yeah.
His fear, which makes total sense to me, honestly, is that if he stands up at an all-hands meeting and says, guys, we only have 6 months of cash left, all his junior engineers are going to panic, update their resumes, and jump ship.
It's a very human anxiety for a leader to harbor. You want to protect your team from the stress of the macroeconomics.
Right, you want to shield them.
But the insight here from Dr. Gupta is profound. If your team cannot handle the economic reality of the business they are building, they are passengers. They are not owners.
Passengers versus owners. That is a brutal but necessary distinction.
Think about the psychology of it. When leadership hides the financials, employees naturally treat the company like an infinite corporate piggy bank.
They don't understand why their request for a new high-end laptop was denied.
Or why they can't fly business class to a conference in London. They just assume management is being stingy.
But when you open the books, when you show the 22-year-old marketing assistant that there are exactly 8 months of payroll sitting in the bank account.
It fundamentally shifts their cognitive orientation.
Because now they see the cliff.
They see the cliff and they realize their own actions dictate whether the company goes over it. They become fiercely, intrinsically cost-conscious.
They start innovating to save money. Not because a manager commanded them to cut 10% of their budget, but because they actually understand the existential stakes of the enterprise.
Right. And if we're talking about radical transparency, we absolutely have to talk about Bridgewater Associates and Ray Dalio.
Yes, they run the largest hedge fund in the world. And they take this concept to a place that, frankly, sounds deeply uncomfortable to most people.
Dalio built Bridgewater on 2 foundational pillars: radical truth and radical transparency.
And to give you listening an idea of the physical reality of this, nearly every single meeting, interview, and dispute in the entire firm is recorded on video.
And made available for all employees to review. There are 0 closed-door backroom deals.
Which is wild. But the most structural, mechanical part of their transparency is their decision-making algorithm. They use a system called believability weighting.
Which is just fascinating.
I need you to break down the mechanics of this because it sounds like science fiction. How does believability weighting actually work in a meeting?
Well, in a traditional hierarchy, the person with the highest title makes the final decision, right? The VP of marketing overrules the marketing director, who overrules the analyst. It's a pure hierarchy of authority.
Right. Title wins.
But at Bridgewater, they meticulously track every employee's track record of making accurate predictions, their domain expertise, and their logical consistency.
Wait, how do they track that?
They use specialized software during meetings where employees are constantly grading each other's assertions in real time.
Hold on. So while we're talking right now, I'd be tapping on an iPad grading how logical your argument is.
Yes. And over time, the system builds a quantitative believability score for you in very specific domains.
Okay, so give me an example of how that plays out.
Let's say a critical investment decision needs to be made regarding emerging market debt. You have a first-year analyst who, according to the data, has a very high believability score in emerging markets because their previous analyses have been incredibly accurate. And they are disagreeing with a senior managing director who has a low believability score in that specific niche.
The MD might be great at tech stocks, but bad at emerging markets.
Exactly. So when they vote on the decision, the algorithm mathematically weights the analyst's opinion heavier than the managing director's.
It completely neuters ego and office politics.
It's an idea meritocracy. It's not a democracy where everyone's opinion is equal because, frankly, not all opinions are equal, but it's not an autocracy either.
The best, most historically proven idea wins the math.
Exactly.
Which brings us to pillars 3 and 4, which are deeply intertwined. Psychological safety and decentralized autonomy.
Let's start with the safety aspect. Google ran a massive internal study a few years ago called Project Aristotle.
Right, because Google is an engineering culture, so they wanted to mathematically prove what made their elite, high-performing teams different from their mediocre teams.
They wanted to know, was it the academic pedigree of the engineers? Was it the size of the budget? Was it how often they socialized outside of work?
And what they found was that none of the hard metrics mattered nearly as much as team psychological safety.
It was the single highest predictor of success.
How do they define psychological safety in this context?
It's defined as a shared belief among team members that the environment is safe for interpersonal risk-taking.
Meaning, with absolute certainty that you will not be humiliated, punished, or marginalized for admitting a mistake.
Or for proposing a wild idea or just asking a seemingly quote-unquote dumb question.
Which is critical because if you are operating a high-velocity startup, you are demanding innovation.
And innovation, by its very definition, requires experimentation.
Right. And experimentation mathematically guarantees a high rate of failure. So if you're cultural operating system punishes failure, people will simply stop running experiments.
They will retreat into doing only what is proven and safe, which means your company's growth will instantly flatline.
This connects directly to a scenario raised by a founder in Nairobi, Kenya, from the masterclass.
Oh, the blameless post-mortems.
Yeah. He wants to implement blameless post-mortems after system failures, but his engineers are completely terrified of speaking up and admitting mistakes to the management team.
Which is totally natural in a low-trust environment.
So how do you fix that? You can't just send out a Slack message saying, hey, everyone, please feel safe now.
No, because culture flows entirely from the actions of leadership, not their memos. The mechanism to fix this requires the CEO to publicly bleed a little bit.
Bleed a little bit. What do you mean?
When a major error occurs, let's say a buggy piece of code brings the main platform offline for 2 hours, a postmortem meeting is called. Before anyone else is allowed to speak, the CEO or the VP of engineering must stand up and publicly own the systemic failure.
So the CEO stands up and says, our deployment protocols were clearly flawed. I take full responsibility for authorizing a system that allowed this bug to slip through.
Exactly. They take the bullet for the architecture. The entire focus of the meeting must be ruthlessly trained on what process failed and strictly forbidden from focusing on who failed.
Oh, I see. When the junior engineers watch the CEO weaponize a massive failure as a systemic learning opportunity, rather than using it as an excuse to execute someone publicly.
That is the exact moment psychological safety takes root.
And once you have that bedrock of safety, you can finally implement Pillar 4. Decentralized autonomy. And the framework here is summarized as context, not control.
Think about what a micromanager actually does. A micromanager tries to exert control by dictating every single step of the process.
Do it this way, use this font, send the email at exactly 3 p.m.
Right. It strips the employee of all agency. Context, not control, completely flips that dynamic. You provide the team with the deep, overarching context, the why we are doing this, the target metrics we need to hit, and the absolute constraints they must operate within. And then you step completely out of their way.
The analogy I've heard for this is, you don't tell your team exactly who to swing the ice axe and place their boots to climb the mountain. You just point to the correct mountain, explain why taking that peak is vital to the war effort, give them the budget for supplies, and let them figure out the optimal route up the rock face.
And because they are the ones actually on the rock face, their route will almost always be more efficient than the one you would have drawn from your office looking through binoculars.
That makes total sense. Which tees up the final pillar perfectly. Pillar 5. Relentless over-communication of vision.
Because if you're going to let them choose the route up the mountain, you better be damn sure they know which mountain is the right one.
But there's this friction point here. A founder in Melbourne voices a frustration I hear all the time from leaders. I feel like I am repeating myself endlessly. Every meeting, I'm saying the exact same vision statement. How much is too much?
It is a massive cognitive blind spot for leaders. The operational reality is, if you feel like a broken record, if you feel genuinely ridiculous saying it one more time, you are just barely starting to break through the noise.
Just starting. Why is the gap so massive?
Because of the profound disparity in attentional focus. Think about your life as a founder or a senior leader. You spend 80 to 100 hours a week agonizing over the vision, the macroeconomic shifts, the 5-year strategic horizon.
You're literally drowning in the context of the business.
But your employees, they spend their 40 or 50 hours a week executing highly specific, microscopic tactical tasks. They are debugging line 400 of a Python script.
Or they're on the phone getting yelled at by an angry customer. Or reconciling a massive Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. The grand vision that feels as obvious as gravity to the CEO is completely invisible to the employee trapped in the trenches of daily execution.
Wow.
You have to repeat the core vision at every all-hands and every major memo until it becomes subconscious muscle memory for the entire team.
Okay, let's take that and transition into the actual mechanics of communication. We know we need to over-communicate the vision, but how do we ensure it actually translates into the daily operational reality?
Right, how do we keep it from just becoming corporate jargon?
Because a lofty vision statement might secure a check from a venture capitalist, but it often leaves the operational team utterly confused about what to actually do on a Tuesday morning. We need a framework to translate the abstract into the concrete.
And the most robust framework for this in the text is the vision cascade. It forces you to break the abstract vision down into 3 distinct interconnected tiers.
Okay, so tier 1 is the North Star purpose. This is the existential why. The classic extreme example is SpaceX.
Their North Star is to make humanity multiplanetary.
It is massive, it is inspiring, and it might take a century. Tier 2 is the 3-year strategic horizon. This is the measurable where. And Tier 3 is the 90-day execution sprints, the tactical how.
Let's visualize the connective tissue between those tiers.
I always map this mentally to using Google Maps. Your North Star purpose is the final destination city. Let's say you're in New York and your North Star is Los Angeles. That overarching destination gives the entire journey meaning. The 3-year strategic horizon is the specific highway route. We're going to take I-80 west through Pennsylvania and Ohio. It is measurable, definitively if you are on I-80 or if you took a wrong turn.
And the 90-day execution sprint?
That is the turn-by-turn direction telling you to merge into the right lane to take exit 42 in exactly 3 miles.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the failure points of poor communication.
How so?
Well, if you just stand on a stage and yell, "We are going to Los Angeles," but you don't give the team the turn-by-turn directions for the next 3 miles, they are just going to drive in circles in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you only give them a list of exits to take but never tell them the final destination is Los Angeles, they have no context for why they are driving. They get bored, they get frustrated, and when they hit a roadblock, they don't know how to reroute.
The cat gate has to be unbroken. Every single employee should be able to trace their 90-day sprint directly up to the 3-year horizon and right up to the North Star.
And when you are communicating the tactical updates within that 90-day sprint, the masterclass emphasizes a psychological constraint known as the rule of 3.
Oh, this is crucial. State exactly 3 core priorities for the quarter and ruthlessly discard everything else. The mantra is, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Human cognitive load is strictly limited. It's just a biological fact. If a CEO walks into a quarterly planning meeting and gives a team 10 top priorities, the team will naturally fragment their focus.
They'll try to make 10% progress on all 10 items.
Which means they will ship nothing of actual substance. Strategic focus is not about deciding what cool things to build. It is almost entirely about having the discipline to say no to 50 incredibly good ideas so you can execute the 3 great ones flawlessly.
One of the most intense, unforgiving frameworks for forcing that exact type of focus comes from Amazon. It's their legendary working backwards process.
Instituted by Jeff Bezos specifically to prevent Amazon from drifting into internal-facing, engineering-driven politics as they scaled past thousands of employees, it is a forcing function for absolute customer obsession.
I've studied this, and it sounds so incredibly counterintuitive to how 99% of companies operate. If you're a product manager at Amazon and you have a brilliant idea for a new feature, you are explicitly banned from making a PowerPoint pitch to the executives.
Banned entirely.
Why?
The reasoning is fascinating. PowerPoint is a tool designed to hide weak ideas. You can mask a terrible product concept behind flashy graphics, charismatic delivery, and vague bullet points.
That is so true.
Bezos recognized that, so he mandated that before a single line of code is written, before a single dollar of engineering budget is approved, the product manager must write a simulated, fully realized press release.
A press release for a product that literally does not exist yet.
Yes. Written entirely from the customer's future perspective, announcing the launch of the product, explaining the specific customer pain point it resolves, and detailing exactly how it improves their life.
And attached to that press release, the team must write an exhaustive FAQ document, right?
Right. They have to anticipate all the brutal, difficult questions a cynical customer or a skeptical tech journalist would ask. Why is this so expensive? What happens when the API connection drops? Why wouldn't I just use your competitor's free version?
I see the psychological mechanism here. If you just start coding, you don't hit those hard edge case questions until beta testing, after you've already spent $3 million on development. By forcing the FAQ up front, you pull all the friction to day one.
Exactly. If the press release reads like a boring internal list of technical specifications rather than a transformative solution for the end user, the idea is scrapped immediately.
It shifts the entire organizational mindset from a technology push, where engineers build cool things and force marketing to sell them,
to a customer pull, where you only build exactly what the customer is demanding.
That is a rigorous filter for keeping the culture obsessed with the end user. Now, shifting from how we communicate about products to how we communicate with each other, we have to look at Kim Scott's radical candor framework.
This solves the daily agonizing dilemma of how to give feedback to your team without destroying morale. Radical candor operates on a simple 2 by 2 matrix with two axes, caring personally and challenging directly.
Let's map the failure quadrants first. If you challenge your team directly, but you don't actually care about them personally, you fall into the quadrant of obnoxious aggression.
That's the toxic, brilliant jerk from Austin we fired earlier. It's the boss who yells and belittles.
But the more insidious failure, and the one most nice, well-meaning managers fall into, is ruinous empathy.
This is where you care personally about the employee, but you refuse to challenge them directly. You know their code is subpar, you know their sales pitches are weak, but you don't want to hurt their feelings or have an awkward conversation.
So you say nothing.
You let them think they are doing fine, and a year later, they get fired during layoffs because they never actually developed their skills. You ruin their trajectory by being too empathetic to tell the truth.
It's cowardice masquerading as kindness.
Wow. Well put. Yes.
Radical candor is hitting the sweet spot of both axes. You deliver unvarnished, rigorous, crystal-clear critiques of their professional output, but you deliver it in a context that assures them you deeply value their humanity and their potential.
It sounds like your strategic logic on this campaign is brilliant, but this specific security flaw in the deployment puts the whole release at risk. Let's fix this together, because I know your standard of work is much higher than this.
It is fundamentally respectful, but it never compromises on the standard of excellence.
The final communication framework the masterclass highlights addresses the modern reality of digital work, the asynchronous first framework.
Pioneered by companies like Basecamp and GitLab. And this directly answers a Q&A from a founder in Dublin who is dealing with severe company-wide Zoom fatigue across a fully remote team. Everyone is just burning out from staring at grids of faces for 6 hours a day.
Because endless synchronous meetings where everyone has to be present at the exact same time are the absolute enemy of execution. Dr. Gupta's advice to this founder is radical. Ban synchronous status meetings entirely.
Wait, hold on. If you ban meetings entirely, how does anything actually get coordinated? How do you brainstorm?
You shift the entire cultural OS to a documentation-first mindset. If a meeting's only purpose is to provide a status update on a project, meaning information is just flowing in one direction, it is a criminal waste of synchronous time.
So what should be instead?
It should be an asynchronous memo on Notion, a documented pull request on GitHub, or a 2-minute recorded video on Loom that the team can watch at 2x speed whenever they have downtime.
And when do you actually meet?
Synchronous time, live Zoom, or in person should be fiercely guarded and reserved only for complex, nuanced debate, emotional check-ins, or collaborative problem-solving where immediate feedback loops are necessary.
I love the phrasing used in the masterclass regarding this. Respecting your team's deep focus time is the highest form of cultural respect you can show. Think about it mechanically.
Yeah.
When you drag a software engineer out of a deep flow state for a mandatory 30-minute status check-in, you haven't just cost the company 30 minutes. You've completely shattered their cognitive momentum.
It might take them 2 hours just to get back into that level of deep architectural thinking. You've destroyed their afternoon for the sake of your own anxiety to know what they're doing.
And zooming out, this framework is a total rejection of the performative hustle culture that poisoned Silicon Valley for a decade. The culture that glorifies busyness over actual output.
Look at Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansen at Basecamp. They enforce a strict 40-hour work week. They actively ban mandatory evening Slack messages, no weekend crunch time.
And the result?
They achieved near zero employee turnover and sustained immense profitability for 2 decades entirely because they designed an operating system that prioritizes calm, sustainable execution over frantic performance.
Okay, this brings us to a really fascinating pivot point. Because if you actually build this intense, highly autonomous, brutally transparent, asynchronous culture, what does it actually feel like for the human being logging in every day?
Right. How do you attract talent?
Exactly. How does a company attract top-tier talent without relying on the superficial perks we mocked at the beginning? The source text provides this catalog of real-world perks that companies have rolled out, and some of them are just staggering.
The arms race for tech talent over the last 15 years produced some truly absurd incentive structures.
I mean, let me just run through a few of these. Google, famously, had the nap pods, the indoor slides, the on-site massage therapists. Meta had on-site pubs and free chef-prepared organic meals 3 times a day.
BrewDog, the craft beer company, offers paternity leave, a full week of paid time off when you adopt a dog.
Netflix offers up to a year of paid parental leave. You have companies offering on-site rock climbing walls, fertility treatments, egg freezing. So the multi-million-dollar question for you is, Do these perks actually buy enduring employee loyalty?
It's the critical question for any HR department, and the behavioral economics data spanning decades gives us a definitive answer. No, they do not buy enduring loyalty.
Wait, really? Not even a little?
The text introduces a concept called the architecture of human flourishing. When you look through that lens, you realize that all those perks, the slides, the kombucha, the dog leave, they are just architectural decoration.
They're just window dressing.
Exactly. They are pleasant. They might get you a good PR article in TechCrunch, but they do not fundamentally alter the psychological fulfillment of the worker.
So what does? If free food doesn't make me love my job, what is the actual mechanism of fulfillment?
True, enduring job satisfaction is synthesized through three core psychological mechanisms: empowerment, inclusion, and psychological ownership.
Let's dig into empowerment.
Let's look at it through the lens of the job demand control model, which was developed by organizational psychologist Robert Karasek.
Break down that model for me. How does it map to daily work?
The research consistently proves that high job demands paired with low job control leads directly to psychological strain, severe burnout, and clinical alienation.
Okay, that's the micromanager scenario we talk about. I need this massive, complex project delivered by Friday, but I'm going to dictate the software you use, the hours you work, and I need to approve every single font change you make before you proceed.
Right. It's high stress, zero agency. It breaks the human spirit. But here is the fascinating part.
What's that?
High job demands paired with high job control, where the employee is given a massive, difficult challenge, but is fully empowered to make autonomous decisions on how to solve it, does not lead to burnout.
Really? Even if it's high demand?
Yes. It results in optimal learning, intense motivation, and deep, enduring job satisfaction.
It's about agency. We are biologically wired to want agency over our environment. We want to feel like our hands are on the steering wheel of our own fate.
Yes. And if you want to see a masterclass in proving that culture is about agency and alignment rather than just throwing money and perks at people, look at the legendary Zappos case study.
Aye, Tony Shea.
The late Tony Hsieh, yeah. He recognized early on that Zappos was essentially just a middleman selling shoes. Their only true, uncopyable differentiator against a behemoth like Amazon was their fanatical customer service culture.
So he made culture their primary product.
And he enforced it in arguably the most extreme, counterintuitive way possible during the onboarding process.
Oh, this is the quit offer, right?
Yes. After weeks of rigorous, intense cultural training for new hires, Zappos would sit them down and offer them $2,000 in cash to quit. On the spot.
Here's $2,000, no strings attached, walk out the door right now.
I remember hearing about this and thinking, why on earth would a company actively try to bribe its own newly trained employees to leave? Because it is an impenetrable psychological filter. Think about the mechanics of the decision.
Okay.
If an employee takes the $2,000 and leaves, Zappos just saved themselves tens of thousands of dollars in the long run.
Why?
Because that person was only there for the paycheck or the perks or the easy ride. They were a mercenary. They didn't actually care about the mission.
Right, makes sense.
But by refusing the money and choosing to stay, the employee triggers a powerful psychological mechanism called cognitive dissonance.
Ah, because they are actively choosing the culture over hard cash.
Exactly. Once you turn down $2,000, your brain has to justify to itself why you made that seemingly irrational choice.
I was really like this place if I just left $2,000 on the table.
Right. The only logical justification is, I must truly believe in this company's mission. It cements a deep internal psychological commitment. It guarantees that every single person answering the phones on the customer service floor is a zealous missionary for the brand.
That is brilliant. It uses human psychology to forge alignment.
Oh.
Another incredible case study on human flourishing through mission alignment is Patagonia.
Yvon Chouinard didn't just want to build an outdoor apparel brand. He wanted to build an engine for environmental activism.
And they didn't just write a nice mission statement about saving the trees. They embedded that activism directly into the mechanical supply chain and their marketing.
We have to talk about the Black Friday ad.
Yes. They ran a full-page ad in the New York Times on the biggest shopping day of the year. It featured their best-selling fleece jacket, and the headline literally said, "Don't buy this jacket."
Which is just wild.
The text below it detailed the exact environmental cost the water used, the carbon emitted to manufacture that specific piece of clothing, and urged customers to only buy it if they absolutely desperately needed it to survive the winter.
From a traditional capitalist perspective, telling people not to buy your product is insane.
Totally insane.
but look at it through the lens of organizational sociology. It created intense professional pride. Pride is an emotional reward we receive from meeting our own internal standards of moral excellence.
So Patagonia employees aren't just clocking in to sell zippers and fleece.
No, they view their daily work as a moral calling to defend the biosphere. That generates a level of discretionary effort, passion, and fierce loyalty that no on-site pub or nap pod could ever hope to replicate.
And then you have Buffer, the social media SaaS company, who built their entire culture on trust through radical salary transparency.
Buffer took transparency to the absolute bleeding edge.
What did they do?
They made every single employee's exact salary, including the CEO's, completely public on an open spreadsheet accessible not just internally but to the entire world.
Wait, to the whole internet.
Yes. They published their revenue metrics, their equity distribution, their pricing models, their diversity data, everything open source.
I try to imagine the sheer panic of implementing that in a normal company. Every single employee knowing exactly what the person sitting next to them makes, knowing what the boss takes home. The conventional wisdom is that it would spark endless jealousy and resentment.
It terrifies traditional managers. But the operational outcome for Buffer was incredible. It completely eliminated the friction of internal salary negotiations.
Because everyone knows the exact formula.
Right. It forced leadership to ensure absolute structural fairness, because if there was a gender pay gap, the whole world would see it instantly. It proved to the team that the company trusted them implicitly.
And as a result,
They attracted elite, globally distributed talent who valued a high-trust, equitable environment over the secrecy of legacy tech firms.
all of this, the autonomy, the transparency, the mission alignment, ties back directly to a foundational concept from the Harvard Business Review that Dr. Gupta highlights in the text: the service profit chain.
Developed by James Heskett and his colleagues at HBR, it establishes an unbreakable mathematical causal link.
Break it down for us.
The premise is simple. You cannot sustainably deliver compassionate, obsessive care to your external customers if your internal culture is toxic and punitive.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. Internal service quality, meaning how leadership treats and empowers employees, directly drives employee satisfaction and retention. That internal satisfaction is the only engine that drives external customer loyalty. And external customer loyalty is what ultimately drives revenue growth and profit.
The ultimate undeniable proof of this is Southwest Airlines and their legendary former CEO, Herb Kelleher.
Oh, Herb Kelleher was a maverick.
While every other major legacy airline was constantly at war with their labor unions, fighting over pennies, experiencing massive strikes, Kelleher completely inverted the traditional corporate pyramid.
He famously stated on the record that clients do not come first, employees come first, customers come second, and shareholders come third.
I can only imagine Wall Street analysts pulling their hair out, hearing a public CEO say shareholders come last.
Initially, they did, but Kelleher understood the mechanics of the service profit chain better than anyone. He fostered a culture of irreverent humor, deep humility, and absolute frontline empowerment.
His logic was basically, if you take care of your people, if you empower them to make decisions and have fun, they will naturally take care of your customers with genuine joy and dignity.
And happy customers come back. And when customers come back, the profits will inevitably follow, satisfying the shareholders.
And the historical result: Southwest Airlines became the most consistently profitable airline in the history of commercial aviation.
By putting employees first.
Okay, we're moving into a section of the masterclass that I find deeply fascinating because it reframes everything we just talked about.
How so?
Well, these ideas of empowerment, decentralized ownership, and radical transparency. Silicon Valley likes to pretend it invented them in a garage in Palo Alto. But these are actually modern digital applications of ancient and global philosophical frameworks.
The source text does a brilliant job of panning the camera out to pull management frameworks from around the globe, proving that these mechanics of human organization are universal.
Let's run through how some of these global frameworks actually function in a modern tech stack or corporate environment. From Japan, the text highlights Kaizen.
We hear this a lot, continuous small improvements.
But mechanically, it's not about leadership mandating a massive disruptive leap once a year. It's about empowering the frontline customer service rep to find a 1% efficiency improvement in their script today.
And poka-yoke, which is the Japanese concept of error-proofing.
How does that translate to software?
Well, in manufacturing, it's designing a plug that physically cannot be inserted backward. In software culture, Pokyok is designing a system where it is physically impossible to deploy code to production without passing automated security checks.
So the system protects you from yourself.
Exactly. It's designing a cultural system where a manager literally cannot fire someone without completing a peer-reviewed checklist, removing the heat of the moment.
Then there is Genchi Genbotsu, which translates to go and see. It demands that managers leave the abstraction of their dashboards and spreadsheets and go down to the literal factory floor or sit in on real customer support calls to observe the actual conditions of the friction.
Moving to Africa, the text highlights Ubuntu, which translates roughly to I am because we are.
It is a profound philosophical framework that emphasizes collective solidarity and shared fate over Western hyper-individualism.
In a corporate setting, Ubuntu means destroying individual bonus structures that pit sales reps against each other and replacing them with team-based profit sharing where my success is intrinsically linked to yours.
And Indaba, which is a traditional system of open-floor, highly inclusive discussion where leadership listens until total consensus is reached, preventing the disenfranchisement of minority opinions.
From the Nordic region, we see the concept of lagom, which means just the right amount. It is an anti-excess, sustainable pacing framework.
It's the cultural rejection of the 80-hour work week.
Right. It's understanding that pushing an engineer to code for 14 hours a day doesn't produce more value. It produces sloppy code that will take 20 hours to debug next week.
But where Dr. Gupta's masterclass gets incredibly profound, and where we need to spend some real time, is how it applies the ancient wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita to the modern startup ecosystem.
This is a masterful synthesis. The source text takes the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the setting of the Gita, and uses it as a direct metaphor for the high-stakes, chaotic, hyper-competitive environment of building a modern company.
Founders and CEOs stepping into leadership are likened to Prince Arjuna.
Right, they're facing overwhelming uncertainty, brutal internal friction, the weight of their employees' livelihoods, and the constant creeping threat of operational burnout.
The first principle applied from the Gita here is nishkama karma. This translates to action without anxiety over the outcomes.
Which is so hard for modern founders.
Oh, impossible. If you look at founders today, especially in the tech space, they are pathologically obsessed with outcomes. They are obsessed with hitting that series evaluation. They are obsessed with getting covered in TechCrunch.
They are agonizing over whether their competitor just raised a bigger round of funding. They are entirely fixated on the fruits of the action.
And mathematically, that obsession creates paralyzing anxiety because the macro outcome is largely out of your control. Interest rates change, pandemics happen, competitors pivot.
Nishkama Karma teaches that you have a divine right to perform your prescribed duty to build the product, to serve the customer, but you are not entitled to the fruits of that action.
So applied to a startup OS, it means decoupling your team's psychological safety from the macroeconomic outcomes.
Yes. You don't punish your engineering team because the VC market cooled off. You reframe performance entirely around the quality of the effort and the integrity of the problem solving.
You teach your organization to fall in love with the daily craft of building, rather than fixating on the mirage at the exit valuation.
Next is samatva, which is the practice of radical equanimity.
Startups are infamous for these violent, whiplash emotional swings, right? You land a massive enterprise client on Tuesday morning, and the whole office is plopping champagne, acting like they conquered the world.
And then on Wednesday afternoon, your lead systems architect abruptly quits, and suddenly everyone feels like the company is going to be bankrupt by Friday.
Samadva is about maintaining a baseline of emotional stability and clear, rational judgment regardless of success or failure. Toxic cultures over-celebrate the wins, breeding arrogance, and they plunge into toxic despair during setbacks, breeding fear.
A culture rooted in samatva builds steady, unbreakable resilience. Managers are explicitly trained to act as emotional anchors.
When a crisis hits, the leader's job is not to panic, but to remain fiercely calm and analytical, absorbing the anxiety of the team so the team can actually focus on execution.
And then there is seva, which translates to servant leadership. In the narrative of the Gita, Krishna, the supreme deity, guides Arjuna. But he doesn't do it as a tyrant king issuing commands from a golden throne.
He serves as Arjuna's charioteer.
He is the Sarathi. Think about the mechanical difference there. Traditional legacy bosses command and control. They sit in the back and whip the horses.
But enlightened leaders serve and remove roadblocks. The modern founder's primary operational role is not to bark orders, but to drive the chariot so the warrior can focus entirely on the battle.
You evaluate your managers not by how well they monitor their employees' login hours, but by how effectively they unblock their teams, secure resources for them, and support their career growth.
Connecting these ancient spiritual concepts of detachment and service to modern burnout prevention, it completely rewires how you view your job. By letting go of your ego, by letting go of the desperate, white-knuckled clinging to a specific financial outcome, you actually build a faster, more effective, and profoundly healthier organization.
It creates an organizational fortress. Because when employees feel served by their leaders and when they are focused on the craft rather than the anxiety of the outcome, they're no longer transactional renters just watching the clock.
They become dedicated warriors of a shared mission.
Which brings us to the final, critical piece of the puzzle.
Yes. We've talked about massive, lofty philosophies. We've gone from Amazon's working backwards to the battlefields of the Bhagavad Gita. But if you are a manager listening to this, how do you actually operationalize this on a random Tuesday morning? A philosophy is useless if it doesn't dictate how a meeting is actually run.
You need rhythm.
The masterclass refers to these as Pika or Peki systems. It's all about establishing high-frequency, low-friction micro-interactions.
You have to replace the heavy, bureaucratic annual performance reviews with continuous, lightweight cultural alignment.
So what does that rhythm look like in practice? Give me the mechanics of a Tuesday morning.
A prime example is replacing the dreaded daily stand-up meeting with the daily async pulse check.
Async again.
Right. Instead of a 45-minute morning Zoom call where 12 people stare blankly at their webcams waiting for their turn to speak, it becomes a quick, written, asynchronous update on Slack or Basecamp.
Just 3 bullet points, right? What I completed yesterday, what I am executing today, what specific roadblocks are in my way.
It takes 2 minutes to write. It completely respects the deep focus time of the engineers, but it maintains total searchable transparency for the project manager.
Another rhythmic mechanism mentioned is the rapid retrospective sprints, the stop, start, continue rhythm.
Yes, deployed every 2 weeks at the end of a sprint cycle. The team takes exactly 15 minutes to voice 3 things.
Okay, what are they?
What internal process should we stop doing immediately because it's causing unnecessary friction? What new tool or process should we start trying in the next sprint? And what is working beautifully that we should absolutely continue doing?
It fosters that psychological ownership we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
It gives the frontline team the agency to organically reshape and debug their own operating system every 2 weeks.
And then you have the cross-functional blocker-busting microjams.
I love this concept.
It's vital. When engineering is waiting on marketing or sales is waiting on legal, instead of letting an email chain languish for 3 days, you institute a 15-minute, highly focused microjam.
The required parties jump on a call with one singular goal:
Yeah.
destroy the bottleneck. No pleasantries, no agenda updates, just what do you need to approve this right now?
These rhythmic cadences ensure that the culture is lived and breathed daily rather than just reviewed annually by HR.
Finally, before a founder decides to scale their headcount or before they go out to raise their next round of venture capital, Dr. Gupta provides a ruthless 15-point cultural health audit. It's a diagnostic checklist.
We won't list all 15 points here, but a few critical checkpoints really stand out that tie everything together.
Let's hear them. Number 1. Are your core values explicitly documented with actual behavioral do's and don'ts? Not just abstract nouns like integrity, but we do not talk over each other in meetings.
Number 3 is the ultimate test of your spine as a leader. Have you removed high-performing individual contributors who damage team psychological safety?
Right. If that brilliant jerk developer from Austin is still on your payroll, you have failed the audit and you are not ready to scale.
Number 12 tests your autonomy framework. Does every major initiative have a single accountable DRI, a directly responsible individual?
If a project is owned by a committee or a working group, it means no one actually owns it and it will fail.
And number 7 measures your true psychological safety. When failures inevitably occur, do your teams immediately analyze systemic root causes, or do they default to finger pointing and covering their tracks?
If it's the latter, your OS is fundamentally broken. Wow. We have covered a massive expanse of territory today, from completely dismantling the myth that culture is accidental or perk-driven to establishing it as the hard-coded operating system of your enterprise.
We walk through the 5 pillars of high-velocity execution, the mechanics of the vision cascade, the psychological realities of human flourishing, the ancient equanimity of the Gita, and the rhythmic daily systems that keep the engine running.
It is a comprehensive, battle-tested blueprint for treating organizational culture not as an HR afterthought, but as the ultimate strategic moat of your enterprise. Venture capital can be raised by anyone. Code features can be cloned by competitors in a weekend.
But a high-integrity, mission-aligned, psychologically safe team, that is mathematically uncopyable.
And this brings it all directly back to you listening right now. Look around your own organization today. Whether you manage a massive, globally distributed engineering department, a local retail storefront, or even if you're just managing your own solo freelance career, your operating system is either being built intentionally, line by line, by you, or it is being built accidentally by the friction of your environment.
There is no neutral ground. You are either writing the code or you are a victim of it.
Exactly.
If we pull all of this together and connect it to the absolute biggest picture, it raises a truly profound, almost paradoxical question about the nature of leadership itself.
What's that?
We established at the very beginning of this deep dive that true culture is defined as what happens when leadership is not in the room.
Right. The behavioral default.
So if we accept that as true, if a perfect cultural operating system means the team makes autonomous, values-aligned, high-velocity decisions seamlessly on their own, then perhaps the ultimate final goal of a great leader is to make themselves entirely obsolete in the daily operations of the company.
To engineer an engine so flawlessly designed and a crew so perfectly aligned that you don't even need to be on the ship for it to reach the destination.
Exactly. The ultimate founder transitions from being the anxious micromanager of daily tasks to becoming nothing more than the quiet keeper of the North Star.
You spend years, maybe decades, pouring your blood and sweat into building a company with the ultimate goal of engineering yourself entirely out of the equation. That is a heavy, beautiful thought to leave on.
It really is.
And it circles us perfectly back to that X-ray machine we talked about an hour ago. You go to the doctor when something is already broken, right? You look at the murky diagnostic landscape hoping to find the fracture.
But if you actually do the work, if you build this intentional, invisible operating system of radical transparency, extreme empowerment, and psychological safety, you don't need the X-ray machine anymore.
Because you haven't just learned how to diagnose the disease. You've engineered an organizational immune system that heals the fractures before they ever happen.